This is Athletes as Educators with former pro basketball player, championship winning coach, and author Angela R. Lewis. Angie Lewis interviews current and former athletes who are passionate about sharing the lessons they've learned and the experiences that have shaped their lives. A resource for parents, a guide for student athletes, a source for current and former athletes, keys to transition off the court. Welcome to the Athletes as Educators podcast with Angela R. Lewis.
Welcome to this episode of the show. Really excited that we have Steve Morrison. He's the Associate Talent Producer at ESPN. Steve is from South Carolina and has been working in sports for a while. We met in the minority sports group chat that we're in. And so, Steve, thank you so much for joining me and chatting with me today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Hey, now I want to talk about your role at ESPN and a bit about your background. What is an associate talent producer? What's that role and what do you do?
Well, in short, I guess I can give you the formal and the informal version. The formal version would be I'm a part of the group of about 10 other talent producers spread across LA, our LA facility, New York City, Bristol, Connecticut, of course, and myself in Charlotte, where I just relocated. And we are responsible for bringing all guests, all non-ESPN employees on our network. So if you tune into First Take and you love First Take and you like, why is Lil Wayne on First Take, or why is Young Jeezy on Sports Center, or why is Common sitting down with Serena in a coffee shop in New York? Those are some things that my group that we touch and we're largely responsible for, bringing our fans closer to our, entertainers, former athletes, current athletes, and, who join our programming to make our content that much better.
That having that mix of entertainers and athletes is something that makes a difference, because people want to see like Serena and Common, and they want to see that connection of sports and entertainment, because there are a lot of parallels. How did you get involved in this work, and why are you so passionate about it?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because I started ESPN 5 years ago, June 6, 2011. Not that I'm counting. But on that day, I was a wide-eyed, first opportunistic production assistant that was hired from a totally different background that was not TV related. But I went to college for journalism and mass communications at North Carolina A&T State University in Greensboro. So there are actually a good amount of Aggies at ESPN, but none of which were really in the path that I've taken to get to where I am, with the exception of the last couple months, but I get to that soon. So basically, I started out as a production assistant. I did that for 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And then, when you're at ESPN, you see that there are these different groups, or organizations that really aren't labeled as such from the outsiders looking in. So like for my group in particular, we rarely put any job postings on the internet. So I had a couple mentors internally, and I highly encourage all the listeners to have mentors in your workplace and out of your workplace, because those are the people that are going to help mold you into the best professional that you can be. We can't we're not in a rat race. We're not here to work every day, go home, sleep, wash, and do it all over again. And so I noticed this group. I was like, who is this group? And why are they always talking to like reporters and writers and grinding away on their computers? And what's so particular or particularly special about this talent group, as ESPN calls them? And so I had a mentor in that group who's no longer with the company by the name of Omar. And so Omar mentored me for a little while. He was a younger African-American male, was like, hey, man, you seem to be a hustler grinder. Come on over and observe our group one day. And the very first time I observed their work and their daily grind, it was around February of 2013. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the year the 49ers and the Ravens played in the Super Bowl in New Orleans. So that was like before the Super Bowl happened. Then I went on vacation because my birthday is the 5th. And then I came back, and my very first day really working with them or shadowing or moonlighting, as some people at ESPN will call it, happened the day after the Super Bowl, which in ESPN's world, the day after the Super Bowl is like really big. It's like everybody's going to be tuning in because they want the Super Bowl recaps, blah, blah, blah. So I made an impact. Long story short, from February until August, I was there as a production assistant. In August, Omar left. And then a couple months later, I took his position. So it's kind of one of those things where I made myself vulnerable to a different group where a lot of people internally had no idea what they did. It was a very small group at the time. It was all about contact building and hustling and all those type of things. I just kind of made myself known amongst the people that were there. And I give a lot of credit to my former director, Carol Mayer, for believing in me and giving me the opportunity to be within those ranks of that very territorial and protected group known as the talent producers.
Now, did you always want to work in sports?
Absolutely. I was a young jock in high school. I was a football player here in Orangeburg at Orangeburg Wilkinson High School.
Represent. Okay.
Got to represent. But while I was in high school, I was a part of the yearbook team. So during the off season of football, I would often like cover our basketball teams that were really good, and they were like going to the state championship. So of course, I always wanted to get into the games for free and get on the sideline and take good pictures and stuff. But the beauty of it is, I got a chance to really expose myself to Adobe PageMaker at a very early. I mean, this is before Adobe was like mainstream. I'm talking about like $1,000 program. So I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm using this. Then I went to A&T for a visit. And this visit was like, during the fall or before I declared where I was going to school. And then I saw their facilities and I'm like, well, their television studio was like, you couldn't compare it to any other HBCU. It had a green screen, 3-point camera shot, HD cameras. They had bureau kits, which is like a camera tripod, microphone. They were allowing students to check out and go out in the field and do their thing. So while I went to school for journalism, I really didn't narrow down into sports until like my senior year, where I started like doing my own sports report for the Aggie Sports Report and covering our football team that unfortunately didn't win many games while I was there. But they're a lot better now. So it's sports in itself was at the foundation, but it didn't drive me as much as journalism as just a focus of education drove me. Like I knew I wanted to be broadcast news or the next best Stuart Scott and it just kind of cultivated into an opportunity at ESPN where I just kind of took it and ran with it.
Stuart Scott made being a sports reporter and talent so cool. Like,
absolutely,
he brought this flavor that we didn't see, and everyone was able to connect with it.
Absolutely, as the other side of the pillow.
Say that again.
I said as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Absolutely. Will you talk about some of the people who helped you along the way and some of the people who've inspired you? As we mentioned, Stuart Scott.
Jay Harris is a good friend of mine. We talk all the time. Even he embraced me when I first got to ESPN. We're all a part of the same fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So it's a brotherhood, and then it's a sports world. I have to give kudos to Bomani Jones. He's someone I listened to all throughout undergrad, and it kind of blows my mind now. Like, I kind of feel like I grew up with Bomani because I remember he was doing his show in his garage in his home, and now he's one of the most well-known faces of ESPN2. I have to give credit to Jamel Hill. Jamel is someone I met in 2007 at the NABJ conference in Chicago, and of course, Dan Barrett. All of those people are like my mentors inside of ESPN. Mm-hmm. Outside of ESPN, it's funny. I don't really have a lot of sports-related mentors that I call mentors outside of ESPN. I have some agents that I admire. I have some people that I admire, but they're not really focused in sports. One of my biggest inspirations is one of my friends, Dr. Josh Myers, who's an African-American doctor at Howard University. We actually graduated high school together. He went straight through and got his doctorate. I'm just every day amazed by his academic achievements. And then, of course, my mom is probably the most motivational inspiration in my life. I should say, just going back as a young man now and looking back at what she sacrificed and how many jobs she worked as me being her only child, and then her being a single mom, it's like, whoa, you take a step back, you look at it, it's like, I didn't see my mom much as a child, but now I understand why. Because, okay, she was an accountant by day, she taught school by night, and then, she lived out this way, and my grandparents lived this way, and it was just like I saw my mom when I saw her, but you don't really take those things into account until like now when she's like, hey, I have your, I have account set up for you. And it's just like, I appreciate that. So that alone, if I could do half of what my mom did for my kids and my family, then I'm going to be a dad of the year for many years to come, or a husband of the year for many years to come.
It's pretty fascinating, though, to look back and think about what our parents have done. We talk about our involvement in athletics and the sacrifices they had to make to just give us the opportunities.
Absolutely.
Will you talk about the impact that sports has on young people and the impact that sports had on you, and who are the people when you were playing that you looked up to?
All right. So I would say the impact sports have on young people in its entirety is huge. Kids look at athletes, whether they want to be role models or not, as role models. I have little cousins right now, one of which who's here at my aunt's visiting, who they love Kyrie Irving. They love LeBron. One of my cousins loves Steph Curry. They have the shoes, they have the socks, they have the athletic gear. They even try to shoot like these guys. And so the minute these guys do anything off the court that isn't up to par, they're paying attention to that too, because, kids have cell phones at a younger age. Cell phones are enormously like in depth with the internet. They're all over the internet. So they don't miss anything is what I'm trying to say here. So athletes, they play a role in which they're able to motivate young people. They're able to teach young people what's right or what's wrong, show them about teamwork. I think right now there's emphasis on health and recreation, making sure that our kids are not just sitting at home and watching these or playing these video games and getting overweight and not being active. There are emphasis around making sure we're not encouraging domestic violence, as that is extremely important at a young age because it's a part of our culture in which we're raised in. For me, growing up, I was a Cowboys fan. I'm not going to say was, excuse me. I am a Cowboys fan. How about them?
Cowboys fans never go away.
We never go away. I was here, and let me be clear. I was here when we were 4-12 last year. I was here when we were 8-8. All those 3 years in a row with Romo and all those good things. But growing up, I idolized Michael Irving and Emmitt Smith and the original triplets. But mainly Michael Irving. Like every time he got a first down and he did his little first down thing, I was me on the football field when I was playing Little League. I even got a couple penalties too, just because I thought I was Michael Irving. So while back then he may have not been the greatest role model for his antics off the field, thankfully I wasn't exposed to those things as a young child because I wasn't watching the hard news. But when you see it and you look back on it, you're like, really, Michael Irving was a wild life.
Right.
But he's a great guy. I've met him a couple times. He's absolutely amazing person. And I love everything about him and those Dallas Cowboys during that era. And I must give kudos to Scottie Pippen, also one of my favorite players of all time on the hard court. People say, why not Michael Jordan? I don't know. It was something about Scottie's game that always had me like, yo, this dude can really hoop. Like Jordan was good, but I mean, obviously he's the GOAT. But I just really like Scottie's game. And I followed him when he played for the Blazers and really wish he would have got over that Lakers hump and would have probably won one. People would be giving him more respect, but that's another conversation for another day.
No, you're right. Scottie was tough, man. And you're on point again in that young people, a lot of people, but definitely young people look at athletes as something they aspire to be.
Absolutely.
And probably more than any other time in our generation, this connection towards social justice and activism. What impact do you see that having on sports? I'm sorry, what impact do you see that having on the generation that's coming up?
Well, I think more than anything is making us more aware. I think the generation coming up now, see, here's the thing. Younger kids that were born 2016, let's say kids that were born in 2000, 16 years old right now, 15, 16 years old. They don't really see color. They don't see racial issues. I can tell by my little cousins and their peers. They grow up in school and their friends are white, black, Asian, whatever the case may be. They don't see color as it's being portrayed amongst the older generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give an example from my youth very vaguely, but they don't really have an understanding of what has happened before my generation's time until they read about it or hear about it or their parents instill it in them.
Sure.
So with that being said, it's important for children to understand and recognize when athletes are taking a stance against social injustice, because it teaches you, or it teaches them rather, why it is still important today that we are standing up for our own race, our own beliefs, and the things that we know are right for our culture, and not just sitting down and taking it on the chin. See, if you don't have those athletes doing that, then younger kids won't really understand the importance of it. So like if I'm a younger child right now and I see Colin Kaepernick is protesting the anthem, if I have any type of intellect about myself, if I'm 14, 15, or 13 or 12, whatever age you may be, I'm going to want to understand what it is that he's talking about. And I may even want to like research a little deeper why it is that he feels this way about the national anthem. You know, what is it that makes it hypocrisy? You know, what has happened in our nation over the course of 10, 15, 20 years that has kind of repeated itself in a smaller or bigger fashion that makes him want to take this stance. Now, for me, you know, I grew up, we learned about the Emmett Tills of the world. We learned about, obviously, the assassination of MLK. We've had these Black History Month programs in our schools, whether they've been predominantly Black. Well, I would say all of the schools I've been in have been predominantly Black. But I can't speak on, you know, any other environment. But I can say when I was in school, it was a focus to educate ourselves around those things. So like if you're a child and you're at, you know, you're in upstate South Carolina, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, that may not be an emphasis because that is not a focus of theirs. So when you see it on sports and you see an athlete taking a stand the way in which they're taking a stand, you become aware, which is very important because awareness is the first step of everything. And once you're aware, you take interest. So then when you see LeBron James and the Cavs coming out with Black Lives Matter, you're recognizing that it's not okay for cops to kill Black people. So if you're a young man and you're not aware of that, you don't govern yourselves accordingly when you're in the wrong type of environment. Or when you're driving down the street and you get put over by a cop, you don't know the importance of, okay, let me just be as courteous as possible where it shouldn't be that way. But you have to make yourself aware, because if you don't, if you're a little too relaxed, things kind of go south really fast. So athletes play a big role in that, because while they believe it or not, there are a group of people that are looking at sports that aren't looking at the news. They aren't looking at CNN. Absolutely. They aren't looking at anything else other than that sporting event, maybe their Twitter timeline at the same time, because, you know, we don't watch one thing at one time anymore. No, but a lot of times people aren't looking at hard news. I mean, I get depressed looking at hard news. I only look at CNN when it really matters. When there's like biggest breaking news coming up, I turn on CNN. Other than that, for me personally, it's like, you know, nails against the chalkboard. What do you believe? What shouldn't you believe? But kids are going to always turn to their athletes first because they idolize them. When you idolize somebody, they can do no wrong, right? I'm sure the Beyonce stans can agree with that. And I'm sure the Jay-Z stans can agree with that. I'm sure anybody who idolizes anyone, you know, Oprah Winfrey or Warren Buffett, you can understand why a child gravitates to athletes.
Yep. And we saw the ripple effect throughout the country as high school teams and college teams had players who would kneel during the national anthem. And it was purely out of recognizing an athlete doing it, hearing bits and pieces about why it mattered, and then that they wanted to take a stand in the same way. Whereas before that moment, we're calling Kaepernick's moment, they wouldn't have thought to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's awareness. And it's not, and for an athlete perspective, it's about putting yourself out there, not worrying about the endorsements you're going to lose, not worrying about the people you're going to rub the wrong way within your own organization, but using your platform to do what's right. And by all means, I can't fault Colin Kaepernick, Brandon Marshall from the Denver Broncos, or anyone else who put their neck on the line to make a stand.
Yeah.
Can't fault them.
One of the stands that happened in a really powerful way was with the WNBA, and how some of the players were fined. And when they talked to the media, they only talked about the fine. Like, they refused to talk about the game. And we saw them all wear black shirts. Can you talk a little bit about that and how these women came together to take a stand in a very collective way?
Well, I think the WNBA is very unique in their entire presentation, being women's basketball, a part of the NBA, where, they do things a little differently, even from their advertisements on their jerseys, which garner them a lot of money, and for rightfully so, based on their sport and their demographic of their fan base. But the women, if you look at a lot of the women in the WNBA, their backgrounds are just like any other minority athlete there is, if not worse. So most basketball players, and I come from an area where women's basketball is really dominant. At my high school, we've won numerous state championships. Women that are successful in basketball come from really tough areas, and most of them just as tough, or women are just as tough as men, if not tougher, because you're battling multiple hurdles to get to the success of where you are. So for WNBA's sake, they know that their fan base is probably one of the most diverse fan bases there are in sports. So you look at it from hindsight, it's not really a lot of us in these stands, as there should be, for the players to be who they are. Let's just take an honest inventory here. Sure. And you got the Indiana Fever, you got the LA Sparks, you got the Minnesota Lynx. And if you look at those audiences,
yeah.
So I thought that it was a very good thing that they did to do that. And speaking of the Lynx, they were one of the teams at the forefront of this movement. And they have some of the realest ball players on their squad. So I think that with the fan bases being who they are, the WNBA players being who they are, and them having their own very large fan base and following as well, especially the following that may not resonate with the NFL guys, the young girls that are out there, they're getting the message too. So it's very important that they're able to articulate the same message so that everybody looks like we're together, which we are, so that all fan bases and all viewership is covered, whether it be, again, white, black, purple, Asian, whatever the color may be, male or female. So now you start conversations across the classroom where females can understand what's going on just as the male. So it's not just in this male-dominated forum, but it has crossover to the women's game. And that's really important, considering their relationship with the WNBA, with the NBA, and considering these endorsements that these young ladies have, because not only are we talking the endorsements that they wear on their jerseys that they have no options of choosing because it's a part of their organization, but the personal endorsements as well, with the likes of people like Maya Moore, Team Jordan, and Simone Augustus, and everybody else that's on that team that has a very dominant voice. And these are championship winning teams. So if a championship winning team can come out and say something, then everybody else needs to recognize what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And they definitely put themselves on the line. And I think
absolutely
that's what made it so powerful. I want to shift gears here just a little bit and talk about ESPN and the Undefeated. And the Undefeated was really at the forefront of creating these town hall meetings and really giving athletes voice and community voice and platforms to share about the different things that are happening in our culture. I remember there was one specifically in Chicago. You remember that one? Can you talk a little bit about why ESPN and sports media can help move the conversation forward with athletes?
Well, I can talk loosely about that.
Yes.
So the town hall is an initiative where, we try to put ourselves in the communities where needs are above and beyond urgent. And Chicago being one of those places. The Undefeated, which is a sector of ESPN that focuses on everything that has to do with minorities, culture, HBCU life, you name it. If it fits underneath that umbrella, they're going to cover it. Did a masterful job, not only in Chicago, but during other town halls that they've had over the course of their brief existence. And the importance of it is, let me put it this way. Chicago could be the most dangerous place, that people may call it. But if you're Michael Jordan, or if you're Gale Sayers, or if you're William the Refrigerator Perry, I don't care what hood you're going in, you're going to be idolized. Because at that point, the violence doesn't really matter. It's everybody's a fan of sports, I'm sure Barry Sanders could walk down the most questionable corner in Detroit and he's protected because he's Barry Sanders. People are going to listen to him because these gangsters or people that decide to rebel have grown up with these guys. So to go back to your question, the undefeated chose Chicago because they know when they put themselves or we bring that brand into that environment, it's going to bring recognition to someone. I don't care if it's just 5 people. It's going to bring recognition to someone that say, hey, we have to kind of reassess what we're doing here as thugs, gangsters, or whatever, they're perceive themselves to be. Because if it's a big enough deal for this brand to come to our neighborhood or our local YMCA to kind of have a call to action, then we're not only just bringing on the parents from unfortunately slain innocent bystanders of Mike Browns and Trayvon Martins and those people into this forum. We're trying to stop it from going forward so that the parent of Michael Douglas, whom I'm just making up a name here, that's sitting in the audience, isn't joining us a year from now without her child or his or her child being present. So it's important that town halls happen, not only for ESPN, not only with or provided by ESPN or the undefeated, but just anywhere in general to bring awareness to do what Kaepernick did in his stint, but from a standpoint of you're doing it from a broadcasting stint and not so much using the platform of the NFL or the NBA, but you're using the platform of our own brand or your own brand or whatever the network brand is going to be to say, hey guys, like this isn't a joke. Like the death toll is at 700 plus 700 for the year in Chicago. We have to figure out what's going on, take the guns off the street and send whatever message you're trying to send so that we can have a better community, whether it be in Chicago or down the street here in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I think, and I know these forums are really beneficial, and they are only here to not only educate, but when, the cameras are off and the hands are being shaken and the connections and relationships are being made, that's when they're at their most impactful. Because then the children see that these athletes or these former athletes, these writers, these journalists, they really care about what's going on in our communities. And so they're here to educate us as to why we shouldn't be in this space hurting our own, but more so uplifting our own.
You touched on so many great points. And as we wrap up here, I just want to recap a couple of things that you said I think is really important. So it takes an entire group of people to bring athletics to the world, right? So it's just the people you see on the field. It's the talent producers. There's all these it's writers who are telling the stories.
Absolutely.
Another group of people who are volunteers who show up to the Boys and Girls Club and make these things happen for a community. So definitely what we see from athletes is really a bunch of other people in addition to them happen. The other thing that is important is that people know that there are so many people doing great work that care, who you may never know their name or see their face.
Right.
Bigger than just the people you see on TV. And it's bigger than just the people that you know. And so I'm really thankful that you were willing to have this conversation with me, because it's no doubt that you're passionate about this. And people need to know about people who they may not see all the time.
Absolutely. I am extremely passionate about it. I don't know how many emails I get a day that says, hey, can you look at my resume? Can you help me on my resume? Can you point me in the right direction? Here, there, and the third. I try my best to cover them all. I may not be as tactful as I can, depending on the season. Right now, I'm in the middle of college football playoff that starts this weekend. I'll be in Tampa for like a week. It's a lot of moving parts in sports, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I make myself an open book. That's mainly my job. All my social media handles are the same. If you DM me, I'm going to respond promptly. If it's of substance. If you send me a message on LinkedIn, I'm going to respond promptly if it's of substance. So I'm going to do what I can do to try to help out anyone. And it doesn't matter the race, gender, age, none of that matters. Because people listen to me. And when I reached out for help, they reached back and pulled me along the way. And I wouldn't be where I am right now if somebody didn't listen to my outcry for help, which is why I try my best to make myself available. I am actively on Twitter and Instagram, a little bit on Snapchat, not so much. Definitely on LinkedIn. And it's all the same, Stephen Morrison or at SteveMo09. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out. And I must say this. Thank you for the Minorities in Sports group. Let me tell you about those guys. Yes, bless up to all of them. I was probably a part of the first 100 people in the group me when I was living in Connecticut. Very active in the cookouts, man on the grill. It's just what we do. Very active in as many planning and organizational things as we could come up with during my time in Connecticut, and we'll hope to spearhead the movement in Charlotte. But it's just it's an amazing group, and it's an amazing networking group that we're able to cultivate a lot of different conversations, cut a lot of corners, and make ourselves even more masterful at our day-to-day jobs because of the bright minds that are in that group. So I want to thank the founders of Minorities in Sports, whom I'm not going to mention right now. I am going to
represent them. It's cool.
I am going to thank them all and all the relationships that have been formed out of that group and continue to be formed in that group. And I must tell everyone to keep a lookout for the Minorities in Sports because we're coming. We're coming.
Yeah.
Represented by every sports realm that you could possibly think of.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Steve, thank you so much. Of course, I'll be in the chat. I'll chat with you again in the chat. We'll put all of your contact info in the show notes. And when the interview is released, thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Hey, anytime you need me, I'm your guy. Thank you. Happy New Year to all.
This is Athletes as Educators.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Connect with me through the Athletes as Educators Facebook page or at Athletes Educate on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. For more resources and information about today's podcast, you can check us out at AngelaRLewis.com.